Thank you. I actually never thought I'd get to wear a cap and gown. First off, I'd like to thank Steve Shepard and Sarah Bartlett for inviting me here today. It's an honor. So what do you say to a group of young men and women who have chosen to go into a profession that many people think will be obsolete in a generation or so? Well, I could give you the standard speech in which I say that this is utter nonsense, that the country and the world desperately need journalists as never before, and indeed I believe that sincerely, and I will certainly touch on that later in my remarks. Or I could give you the speech in which I say the medium doesn't matter, that fine journalism is fine journalism, whether delivered through television, radio, or microwave ovens. Well, I sort of believe that too, with some caveats, and I'll touch on that later as well. But those don't form the heart of what I have to say today. And besides, you've heard too much of all those arguments. Today I'm going to give you the speech you may not have heard. It is the great secret that no one seems to be talking about right now as we all wring our hands about the uncertain future of our profession. And here it is. If you go into journalism and you approach it with humanity and not as a crass careerist, you will have more fun, more pure joy than anyone graduating from any place this year. You will wake up in the morning unsure which new adventure awaits. You will see places nobody in your generation will see, distant places, but also the darker corners of the places where you live. You will meet great writers and thinkers. You will confront moral dilemmas that will force you to grow. You'll make epic mistakes, I promise you. But things will move so fast that if you own up to them, you will have the chance to fix them. In short, you will have an absolute blast. I grew up in a household with no books and boarded an airplane for the first time when I went off to college, the son of a mailman who wanted something better for his 5 sons. I walked into a newsroom for the first time when I was 19. I just wanted a job, but I found a calling. It was a hot day in New Orleans. I heard the clattering of typewriters, and yes, there were typewriters. I saw people rushing around on deadline. I saw people hunched over their desks with half-eaten sandwiches, doing interviews over the phone, shouting at each other on deadline, and I fell absolutely in love. Suddenly, a young man who was a little listless, with scattered but intense reading habits, getting B's and C's, was working long hours, not even putting in for overtime. I did the grunt work covering fires and murders. The first time I saw a bloated dead body being pulled out of the Mississippi River, I turned away and vomited while the cops laughed at me. I listened as mothers told the stories of the lives of sons who had killed or been killed, and I came to understand that literally everyone has a story if you just shut up and listen. I grabbed hold of anybody who could teach me anything, and I forced myself on them. One reporter who was ignored by all of his colleagues because he was a little eccentric taught me that if you smile and show some humility, people will invite you into their houses and tell you their stories. They just want to tell them to somebody who will honestly listen and who won't greedily exploit their tragedy. When I ran out of teachers, I grabbed better newspapers from the library and deconstructed the way stories were put together until I could do it myself. I learned fairness by being unfair. One day while covering a rape trial, I wrote a hyped and exaggerated story about the defendant, just so I could make the front page. I was 20. I was overeager, too ambitious, and I was proud of myself. Front page stories were hard to come by for a beginning reporter. I was pleased with myself, and I walked into the courtroom, and the defendant, an indignant man, deserved a lot better than an ambitious careerist trying to make a name for himself. He glowered at me the whole day until I shrank in the back of the courtroom. Then his lawyer chewed me out, and I deserved every word of it, and I learned a valuable lesson about fairness, one that I've never forgotten. I had misdirected my ambition, abused my power, meager as it was, and I never did it again. In the years since, I've worked for 5 newspapers, counting 2 stints at the New York Times. I've stumbled almost literally into a profession that has taken me around the world, that has let me ask tough questions of people like Hillary Clinton, but has also left me mumbling incoherently through a lunch with Gabriel Garcia Marquez and finally asking him to autograph his autobiography for me. Again, I have had an absolute blast. You're entering this profession at an epic, life-changing moment when print and broadcast journalism, threatened as it hasn't been for a generation, will do what it always does, reinvent itself in ways we can only imagine. And I envy you. You get to recreate the profession the way Edward R. Murrow remade radio and television news and helped expose Senator Joe McCarthy's hypocrisy. Another great secret. More people read the great newspapers than ever before. Don't let Wall Street and money men tell you otherwise. The New York Times isn't just read by the million people who get it on their doorsteps every morning. It is read by millions more online, hidden in cafes, in countries where people can only whisper about the news, and instantaneously in every corner of America.